Right, today we're going to finish this volume 40, the last two suttas, chapters 15 and 16. Chapter 40.15 is Vekanasa Sutta M80, the discourse to Vekanasa. Vekanasa is the name of a very interesting hermit. He's one of those wanderers in the Buddha's time whose following, if you like, has come down to our present day. In fact, it is said that most of the Vaishnava religionists in India belong to this, or go back to this teacher. I mean, the Hindus, they have the three great gods, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu. Brahma, of course, is the old god, so it's not so popular for some reason in Hinduism. One possibility is because he's more Buddhist than anything else. The Hindus probably don't worship him for that reason. Shiva, as we know, is a very popular god because he's powerful and he's often seen as a destroyer, and he's invoked by people who think in terms of power. Then there is Vishnu. Vishnu is a kind of a god who sustains the world, according to the Hindus. So this group, the Vaishnavas who worship Vishnu, many of the priests, kind of the lineage go back to this Vekanasa who has come to see the Buddha. So this M80, Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 80, is a recording, a very interesting interview, dialogue between Vekanasa and the Buddha. And it's also interesting to see how the origins of these lineages is like. Vekanasa, from this sutta, is presented as someone, as a guru who believes in the highest pleasure. Okay, so he talks about the highest pleasure. In other words, he's a hedonistic teacher. Something like the purpose of life is to enjoy life, and that is his idea. So he talks to the Buddha, and then the Buddha questions him, what is this philosophy of yours, and so on, and it goes from there. And to cut a long story short, he's converted in the end with some various interesting details which we'll look at in a moment. Okay, so now let's look at the translation, which is found on page 193. 193, just a bit only there. So just do look at the number M80, that is the sutta number. Right? At one time, the Blessed One was staying in Anathapindika's park in Jeta's near Savatthi. So Savatthi, as you know, is this very famous city. So the monastery is outside of Savatthi, and people often go there. So they also visit the Buddha, and the Buddha stayed there for most of the time. That's slightly under half the 45 years of his ministry. Then the wanderer Vekanasa approached the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and friendly exchange was concluded, he stood at one side. No need down, I just stood at one side. Standing thus at one side, he uttered this udana, or inspired utterance, to the Blessed One. So here we have this wandering teacher who comes to see the Buddha to share his teaching, as it were. He comes along and says, okay, this is my belief. Notice here the sutta says he uttered his udana. Udana is a kind of inspired saying. In other words, he holds this view very dearly. He says, this is perfect beauty, this is perfect beauty. Or simply, perfect beauty, perfect beauty. Then the Buddha asked him, but what is this kachana that you speak of thus? This is perfect beauty. This is perfect beauty. So he replies, he says, that perfect beauty, Master Gautama, is the beauty that is neither surpassed by anything better nor anything more sublime. Alright? That's a typical philosophical answer. For example, there was a time when, at the height of the spread of Christian religion during the colonial days, when people ask a question like, why do we need to believe in the Creator God? How do we know He exists, right? So some of these theologians, they come up with all kinds of arguments. And one argument is very similar to this remark. Okay? This theologian said, God is that figure of which there is no one higher or bigger or more supreme. Okay, simply put, right? So, in other words, this theologians are trying to define this God idea into being. And if you study even basic philosophy, you know very well, we cannot simply define anything into being. We can say anything we like, but it doesn't mean it is real. And for example, if I were to say, I have a two-headed dog and I can describe this dog in great detail, it still doesn't exist. I'm just telling you what it is. Okay? This is the style of fiction. It's not that we don't do this. We do a lot of this in English literature, and some people do this very successfully and makes a lot of money, millions of dollars, like J.K. Rowling, for example. In her imagination, she wrote all those stories about Harry Potter, and there are people who write about Star Wars and so on. These are all not real, but we know they are stories. So now we have a problem here. See, when you come to religion, if you take early Buddhism, we talk about, for example, talking animals, right, and stories about gods and demons. Now we know they're stories, and we understand that there are morals behind these teachings. It's not important that we remember this god, this demon, that demon, but important thing is to remember the Dharma. What is the teaching? What is the message behind such stories? Okay? I mean, it's just like the fairy tales. You know, we have so many fairy tales. It's not really important we remember the names of Jack and Jill and Hansel and Gretel, but rather what those stories mean to the children, for example, to the adults. And this is a very important concept we must have when we study Buddhism, especially today in our modern times. Otherwise, religion can stunt our growth, or worse, hold us back in superstition. Okay? All religions have a very high degree of superstition. Superstition means, number one, looking for answers outside of yourself. Number two, it means attributing any kind of problem or situation to one cause. Only one cause. Maybe it's a god or bad luck, whatever. And number three is that we have no control over it. That's called superstition. Right? So you can imagine how much of Buddhism is superstition. Don't talk about other religions. So if we talk about, for example, a certain Buddha or millions and millions of Buddhas, and we don't substantiate, we can't substantiate such a belief. It's just like talking about God, you know. So if you meet intelligent people, you're going to have a problem. They're going to ask you, how do you know? And one of the local theologians say, oh, these things are as true can be. I don't know what it means. And he's going around talking to large crowds, and he talks like that. So you can imagine, what does it mean to say that, you know? And what kind of Buddhism are we spreading? What kind of Buddhism are we producing? It's very scary. We will attract the wrong crowd. Now the good thing is, up to now, Buddhists in Singapore don't make bombs, don't hurt each other, and that's very good. So as long as we just talk, argue, debate over words, maybe that's fine to that extent. But even then, we want, if we are thinking people, you come for a Buddhist talk, you come for a Dhamma study, you want to think more deeply, you want to feel happy, you want to be able to ask questions, ask intelligent questions, get intelligent answers. And this is very important. So this is where I must say we have to challenge our Dhamma speakers. Sometimes you have to challenge me even, whenever necessary. So that it also keeps me thinking, am I saying the right thing? And very often some of the difficult points, people ask me questions, I look back and I look for the answer, and that helps a lot. So this is why we cannot assume that as a Dhamma speaker we know everything. And this seems to be quite the case. Very often we see here in Singapore, let me not talk about other places because I'm most familiar here. And these last two suttas are very significant because in a sense they talk about the nature of the Dhamma teacher, the guru, the monk, the layman. I must say from my observation of over 4 decades or more that every Dhamma teacher has psychological problems, emotional problems of some kind, introversion. In other words, you find that they won't talk to you unless you talk to them. I might say nothing wrong with that, maybe. But I think Dhamma teachers should be more friendly with others. And I'm saying this because people actually complain to me. Say, how come this Dhamma teacher is not so friendly? When I talk to him, he just don't talk to me. In fact, he told me I don't do small talk. Things like that. These are real things, So, once you have this kind of feedback, you're wondering what kind of Dhamma teachers are we having? We don't realize that this is a very serious problem we have because none of these Dhamma teachers we have around, including myself by the way, are properly trained. We are all self-trained. Of course, unfortunately, because I have so many suttas and I went to different teachers. So we all are accidental teachers. There's no proper college, university training all these speakers, these pastors. We have many temples. So sooner or later, let's hope in the next generation, some kind of focus is given to teacher training so that the temples will have proper teachers, proper pastors, proper speakers, and not just charismatic people. And every time you come for a Dhamma talk, you compare teachers rather than learn teachings. So this is one area we have to work on, definitely by the next generation. So in the sutta, you see this guru who talks about his idea of truth is pleasure. Right? And you hear all these funny ideas from different teachers also. Each of them have their own favorite teaching. Right? So we need to question all these teachers. What's going on here? So the Buddha asked, what is this you're talking about? And he says, this beauty is so beautiful, there's nothing beyond this. Alright, it's not very much a definition. It's just like saying, this God is the greatest being, full stop. And whether you believe it or not is another matter. Of course, in the case of the God believers, they can say that because they are running the country, they are ruling us, so they could say such things. But once you question, of course, if this was a colonial period, you wouldn't dare to question because you might lose your job, you might get into a lot of trouble, they might throw laws against you and so on. But now, in a secular state like Singapore, of course, we can ask anything we want of religion. We can write anything we want sensibly of religion to make people think, to raise the quality of our religion and teachings. So, the conversation continues, 3.1. This Kachana would indeed go on for a long time in this way. This is one of those occasions you see that the Buddha, something like giving a deep sigh, In simple words, the Buddha says, oh dear, this is going to take a long time. Because Vikanasa is not sure what he's talking about, you see. But the interesting thing here is the Buddha is very patient. He actually allows this conversation to go on. He didn't say, I'm not going to talk about this, I don't do small talk. Okay? So, Buddha continues, 3.2. You say that perfect beauty, Master Gautama, is the beauty that is neither surpassed by anything better nor anything more sublime. But you have not defined what that beauty is, right? So you notice the Buddha said, you have not really defined it. Yes, you have tried to say something about it, but you have not defined it. You have not really clearly stated what it is. Then the Buddha comes up with an analogy. The first analogy is called a country's beauty. So the Buddha says, Kachana, look at 3.3, Kachana, it is just as if a man were to say, I desire and love the most beautiful girl in the country. Okay? I want to marry this most beautiful girl in the country. And if people were to ask him, all right then, do you know whether this most beautiful girl is a Kshatriya lady, in other words, from a noble class, high class, or Brahmini, a Brahmin class, a priestly or educated class, a Vaishya, business class, or Shudra, working class? He would answer no. Say no. Then the people ask, okay, all right, then do you know the name of the family of this most beautiful woman? Is she tall or short or medium height? Is her complexion black, dark or clear? Is she from a village, town or city? And again this man will answer, no, I don't know. Or I don't think about such things. I just want to have this most beautiful woman. And if people were to ask, all right then, do you desire and love for someone whom you neither know nor have seen? And you say yes. Okay? Oh, well, this is a funny example, a parable where someone just says, I want to marry the most beautiful woman, and doesn't really know who or what she is. Then the Buddha said, what do you think, Gacchana? Such being the case, does it not come to arise in you that this is a groundless statement? Isn't this a groundless, baseless idea? Then he's quite annoyed. He says, surely, Master Gautama, such being the case, the man's word comes to be groundless, he has to admit it. Then he says, even so, Gacchana, so this is the Buddha saying, I think, even so, Gacchana, you say thus. So the Buddha says, why do you continue saying this kind of idea, since you cannot even define it? Then Vikanasa replies, section 4, he gives his own parable. He says, Master Gautama, just as if there were a beautiful beryl is a kind of like a glass crystal. There's a beryl gem of the purest water, 8-faceted, well-polished and cut, or well-worked on, lying on a red woolen blanket, glows, radiates and shines. Of such a radiance is the self that survives death unimpaired. So it seems to like change the subject a bit. It says, imagine there is this jewel, and it is placed on a nice woolen blanket. In other words, looks very beautiful. And it says it is radiant, right? And the self that survived death also is radiant, survives like that. Then the Buddha replies, Buddha says, what do you think, Gacchana? This beautiful beryl gem of the purest water, 8-faceted, well-polished and cut, lying on this red woolen blanket, glows, radiates and shines. Okay, this jewel or a glowworm or firefly in the thick of blinding night, which is brighter? This jewel sparkles on this nice felt cloth. Compare this to a firefly in the dark of night, which is brighter. So he has to say the glowworm stands out brighter in the dark of night. And then the Buddha said, okay, you look at this glowworm now. Okay, now the repetition occurs. So we just need to look at the keyword. In this case, since I'm talking to you, if reading is good to like read and kind of listen to recording. So then the Buddha says, all right, think of this glowworm which is very bright in the dark of night. Now if you compare the light of the glowworm to an oil lamp that is burning, which would be brighter? Of course, Vikanasa has to admit it's the oil lamp. The oil lamp is brighter. And then the Buddha says, okay, now that you are able to see that, imagine you have this oil lamp which is burning brightly, and then there is this great blaze, a bonfire burning outside, so which is brighter now. Okay, then you can ask, of course, it's the bonfire, which is the bonfire in the night. It's certainly very bright. Then the Buddha goes on to say, what about the morning star? If the morning star shines, okay, here we have a bit of an interesting situation here. The morning star possibly is Venus, and it is either called evening star or morning star, because if you see in the evening, it's called evening star. If you see in the morning, it's a morning star. It's supposed to be bright, in other words. So here he has to admit, he says, oh, the morning star is brighter, because we're talking about here it's already morning and the star is shining at dawn rather. Yeah? So now the Buddha says, okay, now there's something else. You compare this morning star to the full moon, the harvest moon. It's a famous analogy. The moon in autumn, the sky is cloudless, at night is beautiful and bright. So definitely the moon is brighter. So you can see here the Buddha is using incrementally brighter figure. Then finally the Buddha says, what about the sun? Compare it to the sun. The sun at midday, the sun, just now the full moon is on the 15th, okay? Now the sun is midday in autumn, cloudless sky, sun is shining brightly. So, which one is brighter? Definitely it's the sun. So, then the Buddha says, look at 11.1. So here the Buddha says, of course here we would say the sun is definitely the brightest and the most sublime, or the best of all the lights. Beyond this Kachana, I know many more numerous gods whom neither the lights of the sun nor moon equal. Right? So the Buddha says, let me just stop the comparison here, because even though I tell you the sun is bright, there are other gods and devas, these higher beings, who are really bright and radiant. Okay, in our own time, imagine other universes, some of the stars in other parts of the universe, really bright. So the Buddha says, yet I do not say that there are no other beauty greater or more sublime than that. So what the Buddha says, everything is here is comparative, right? So you can't really say, oh, this is the greatest beauty. But you, Kachana, say that of beauty that is the glowworm or the firefly in the thick of the blinding night gives off this radiance. Yes? So it says, you compare your idea of beauty to this little jewel, but you agree that even the glowworm is brighter than this little jewel. So what the Buddha is saying is, you can't say that is the supreme beauty, the highest beauty in that sense. So here the Buddha is using logic to simply debunk this idea. He's talking about the greatest beauty without really defining it clearly. So the Buddha is saying it's a little confusing here, in other words, so it's not very helpful at all. So imagine here how it feels, right? So then the Buddha continues with the proper teaching. The actual teaching starts here. So, section 12. There are Kachana. Notice Buddha calls him Kachana, so you know that is his family name. These 5 causes of sense pleasures, what are they? What are the 5? Okay. Form cognized by the eye that are desirable, agreeable, pleasurable, laughable, connected with sensual desire, arousing lust. Okay, look at this first one. Form, okay, so, which is something we are attracted to. Number 2, sounds, with all the same qualities, very attractive sounds, and we're carried away by it. 3, smells, and then 4, tastes, 5, touches, okay. So these are the workings of our 5 physical senses, and they're very attractive, and we're caught up with them. So these Kachana are the 5 causes of sense pleasures. Now Kachana physical pleasure and mental joy arise dependent on these 5 causes of sense pleasure. This is called sense pleasure. These sense pleasures arise on account of sensuality or sense object, but beyond sense pleasure, there is a sensuality or sense object that is the peak of sense pleasure, and here it is called the peak. Now the Buddha is still teaching, not finished yet. This is a very interesting situation. You got to follow it carefully, otherwise you miss something that's going to happen. So the Buddha is talking about the 5 physical senses, and it says people are attracted to it, and so there is this source of the sense pleasure. They're called sense objects. People get caught up with it, but there is the highest kind of pleasure here, and this I call the peak, the highest of them all. It's not finished yet. He's talking halfway, and then suddenly Vikanasa got very excited. He cuts in. Look at that 14.1. When this was said, the Vandra Vikanasa said this to the Blessed One. It is wonderful, Master Gautama. It is marvelous, Master Gautama. How well said this is by Master Gautama. That is to say, the sensual pleasure arises on account of sensuality, and then beyond all this, there is the peak of sensual pleasure. That's the highest kind of sensual pleasure. So he thinks that the Buddha is actually endorsing his idea. You follow that so far? He got excited, and so he cuts in and said, "Wow, that's wonderful! You are supporting exactly what I'm saying." So he thinks, see? But the problem here is he's interrupting the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha is not finished. Okay? So then the Buddha had to help him a bit. So the Buddha says, 14.2, Kachana, it is hard for one holding a different view, keeping different priority, having a different personal preference, or under different influences, keeping to a different practice, following a different teaching to understand sensuality or sense object, sense pleasure, or the peak of sense pleasure. Right? So the Buddha says, hold on. I don't think you understand exactly what I'm saying. Right? Then the Buddha says, but those monks, Kachana, who are arahats, whose influxes are destroyed, who have lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached their own goal, destroyed the fetters of being, are completely liberated through final knowledge. So the Buddha effectively is saying, I'm sorry, I think you got it wrong. What I'm saying, the peak of pleasure here, I don't think you can understand it because you're following a totally different teaching here. Only the arahats who are totally awakened know what I'm talking about. So you can guess what the Buddha meant by the peak of pleasure. He's referring to nirvana. You see? So he's using the word pleasure here in a higher meaning. See? But here Vikanasa got it wrong. Here this is where it's a very interesting situation here. Many times in previous talks I used to tell you, if we go around looking for teachers, we will definitely find a teacher who will endorse whatever we think. Whatever ideas, no matter how crazy we have, there is a teacher somewhere out there in the world. We look for him, he will say, yes, that's exactly what I teach. And then you say, wow, I'm right. But remember, there's a possibility you misunderstood what the teacher is telling you. The teacher didn't say, I agree with you. So here the Buddha clearly says, hold on, that's not what I mean, is it? So, understandably, how does Vikanasa feel here? Look at 15.1. When this was said, the wanderer Vikanasa was angry and displeased at the Blessed One, and he reviled and disparaged and censured the Blessed One, saying, the Blessed One will be proven wrong, or will be worsted. I will prove you wrong, he said. Then he said to the Blessed One, So then there are some recluses and Brahmins here who, without knowing the past, without seeing the future, who then claim thus, destroy this birth. The holy life has been lived, what needs to be lived has been done, and so on. In other words, so he challenged the Buddha. He says, so what you're saying is there are those recluses, even though they do not know past lives, they can't recollect past lives, they know the answer, they can become awakened. Right? So he's like cutting at straws. So here, then he says, oh, this will be laughable, this can be true, can it? So he's challenging the Buddha. He's saying that all the arahats must have this kind of past knowledge, future knowledge, in other words. But then the Buddha replies, Buddha says, if according to you, Kachana, those recluses or Brahmins who, not knowing the past, not knowing the future, claim the arahathood birth is destroyed and so on. So the Buddha says, but Kachana, let the past be, let the future be. Let's say, just forget about past and future. Let an intelligent person, honest, trustworthy, upright, come to me, and I will instruct and I will teach him the Dharma, such that practicing which he would in no long time know and see for himself. Thus, this indeed, there is full or right liberation from the bonds, that is the bonds of ignorance. Right? So this is the famous challenge the Buddha throws to non-Buddhists. He says, let's not argue about all this, like knowing about the past, knowing about the future, because we are talking about things that we don't really know, which at that moment Vekanasa doesn't know. So he says, well, I give you this challenge. If you become a monk, you train under me, you get the answer. You overcome this ignorance. Suppose Kachana, a tender boy child, an infant lying on his back, bound by the 5 bond strings, and the 5th around the neck. So this child is like safely tied down so it doesn't fall. Okay, and then following his growth and maturing of his faculties, he'll be free from the strings. I remember those days as a baby, you know, there's this bamboo seat, and this baby will be sitting in this little chair, but because it's very active, so the legs will be tied with a kind of a soft string, and then the hands also. But in this case, the neck also. So this baby kind of can move a bit, but very limited movement so that it won't fall. Then when the baby is big enough, all these strings are removed. Okay? 16.7. Following his growth and maturing of his faculties, he would be free from the strings. He would know, I am free, and he would be without bondage. In the same way, Kachana, let an intelligent person, honest, trustworthy, come forward, you become a monk, I will guarantee you, I will teach you the Dharma, you will discover the truth. So, according to this record we have, Vekanasa finds that this is acceptable. He takes refuge in the Buddha. But you can't have feeling that here there's something missing. In other words, Vekanasa seems to give up so easily. But in a sense, his argument is not very strong. He seems to be quite a sentimental person who believes in, imagine, pleasure as the highest thing in life. You know? I mean, he's supposed to be a religious man. So, although he takes a refuge, he's not the stream winner yet in this case. And if we look at history, you find that probably he went back to his old ways of teaching, and his lineage has come down to us even to today in the Vaishnava tradition. But the point of the story remains, okay? Here, it means that different teachers can come with different ideas, but we must always remember, where do these ideas lead us? Do they free us, or do they cause us to be caught up with more ideas? And it's good to remember this very simple, very wonderful saying. What we believe will hold us, but what we know will free us. So we reflect in that way, so we understand better what's going on here.